energy on set was incredible. I didn't actually work with any stuntmen on the set.
We would love to. We just need the leads. So anybody out there, if you've got any leads for us, you can email us, you can call us.
American picker Mike Wolfe once turned forgotten junk into a multi-million-dollar empire. American Pickers made him rich, famous, and the face of a show that reshaped reality TV until everything around him started collapsing at once. His divorce drained $6 million. His decades-long friendship with Frank Fritz ended in a bitter feud before Frank tragically passed away. And now his Nashville store has mysteriously shut down with no clear explanation. Fans are asking the question he avoided for years. What really happened to Mike Wolfe? Is the show even real? Why are locals calling him the face of gentrification? And how did a man who built his life rescuing forgotten treasures end up struggling to hold his own together? The truth about Mike Wolfe is finally coming out, and it's nothing like what you see on TV. This is where he confesses it felt like they took everything, and the weight of that only grows as the rest of the story unfolds. Long before TV cameras followed him across back roads, Mike Wolfe was just a kid trying to survive the rough parts of growing up. He didn't come from money, opportunity, or comfort. He came from a single-mom household where every dollar mattered and every day felt like another reminder of how little they had. His mother, Rita, worked non-stop to support Mike and his siblings, Beth and Robbie. And while most kids found escape in sports or TV, Mike found it in the places other people avoided: alleys, backyards, abandoned corners of small-town Iowa. He learned early that the world didn't hand him anything. He had to look for it. At just 6 years old, he spotted a banana seat bicycle tossed behind a neighbor's house. Most kids would have walked past it. Mike dragged it out of the weeds, cleaned it up, pumped the tires, and sold it for $5. It wasn't the money that hooked him, it was the thrill. The idea that something everyone else ignored could suddenly become valuable in the right hands. While other kids played after school, Mike was digging through garages, pulling rusty bikes home, and turning the family's small garage into his workshop. His mother let him take over the space because she saw something in him, not just a kid collecting junk, but someone who understood how to bring forgotten things back to life. Piece by piece, bike by bike, Mike Wolfe was building the instincts that would one day turn into a career. He didn't know it then, but that early obsession with overlooked objects was shaping the exact mindset that would make him famous. Spotting value where no one else bothered to look. But the same instincts that pushed him forward would one day place him at the center of conflicts he never expected, and that part of his story is only just beginning. Before the TV deals, before the merchandise, before the tour buses started showing up, Mike Wolfe was grinding in silence. He didn't inherit a family business or walk into an established trade. He built everything from the ground up. After years of fixing bikes in his garage and hustling through flea markets, he opened a small bicycle shop, thinking that was the path. But even then, antiques kept pulling him back. Every time he spotted a forgotten sign, a rusty gas pump, or an old motorcycle frame buried in someone's barn, he saw more potential than anything sitting on his showroom floor. By 2000, he finally listened to that instinct. He shut down the bike shop and bet everything he had on a tiny antique store in LeClaire, Iowa. No big investors, no safety net, just one man and decades of experience digging through the forgotten corners of America. He called it antique archaeology because that's exactly what it was: not shopping, but uncovering history. While most people were chasing easy money, Mike was crawling into barns so dusty you could barely breathe. He knocked on doors, followed back roads, and drove thousands of miles just to find one item worth saving. No days off, no shortcuts, no fame, just a relentless belief that these pieces of history still mattered, even if nobody else cared. That little Iowa shop slowly became a destination. People walked in because they wanted old stuff, but they stayed because Mike gave every item a story. And the more people connected with his finds, the more his vision grew. Something bigger was forming, a brand that didn't exist yet, but would soon explode far beyond a small-town storefront. Mike didn't know it then, but every late-night drive, every dusty barn, and every forgotten object he restored was quietly setting up the moment that would change his entire life. Because the next chapter wasn't just about antiques, it was about convincing the world to care about them the way he did. And no one expected how hard he had to fight to make that happen. Mike Wolfe didn't get American Pickers handed to him. He had to claw his way into television one closed door at a time. After years of picking through barns and abandoned garages, he started filming his own finds with a simple camera, documenting every dusty crawl space and every forgotten relic he pulled back into the world. He wasn't trying to make reality TV, he was trying to prove that history didn't have to die quietly. For 5 straight years, he pitched his idea to networks that didn't get it. Executives told him nobody would watch two guys digging through junk. They said it wasn't exciting, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't TV material. But Mike kept pushing because he knew he wasn't selling antiques, he was selling the thrill of discovery, the stories behind the objects, and the hidden pieces of America people didn't even know existed. Then, in 2009, after endless rejections, the History Channel finally said yes, and everything changed almost overnight. When American Pickers premiered on January 18, 2010, it pulled in 3.1 million viewers, instantly becoming one of the biggest debuts in the network's history. Within weeks, it climbed even higher, proving the critics wrong. People did care. They cared about the items, the history, the journeys, and the human stories buried under rust and dust. What Mike created wasn't just a show, it was a new way of bringing history to life. Instead of museum walls and textbooks, he brought viewers into real garages, real barns, real lives. Every pick connected the past to the present, and audiences felt like they were riding shotgun on every road trip. But while the world saw the victories and the smiles on screen, something else was happening behind the scenes, something that slowly began to chip away at the foundation Mike had built. Because success didn't just bring attention, it brought tension, and the cracks were about to show. For more than a decade, the heart of American Pickers wasn't the antiques, it was the chemistry between Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz. They weren't co-hosts created by a network. They were two kids who grew up in the same small town, bonding over the same struggles. No fathers in the picture, not much money, and a shared obsession with old bikes and forgotten relics. Their friendship stretched back to middle school, long before either of them had any idea a TV camera would follow them one day. Their dynamic worked because it was real. Mike was the fast talker, the deal maker, the one who always had a new lead. Frank was the calm, steady balance, the guy who loved quirky collectibles and made people instantly comfortable. Viewers didn't just watch them pick, they watched two old friends on the road, finishing each other's sentences and arguing like brothers. But the deeper the show went into fame, the more the cracks started to form. By 2020, those cracks were impossible to hide. Frank's health began to decline. Years of battling Crohn's disease left him in constant pain. He had major back surgery, struggled with addiction to painkillers, and the network's strict policies kept him off the road. While fans assumed he'd be back, months passed, and nothing. Then, in July 2021, Mike posted that Frank was no longer part of the show. The statement was calm, polite, and full of nostalgia. But Frank wasn't having it. In an interview, he called the post BS, saying he and Mike hadn't spoken in 2 years, not even during his surgery. He felt abandoned, pushed out, replaced by Mike's brother Robbie, and he believed the show was leaning entirely toward Mike's spotlight. Frank didn't hide his anger. Mike stayed mostly silent. The public feud grew louder. Fans took sides. Petitions poured in demanding Frank's return. But behind all that noise, Frank's health continued to fall apart. Then came July 2022. Frank suffered a severe stroke that left him paralyzed and bedridden. The tension, the anger, the interviews, none of it mattered anymore. His condition never improved. And on September 30, 2024, Frank Fritz passed away at just 60 years old. Despite everything, Mike was there in his final moments, holding his hand, saying goodbye to the friend he'd spent 40 years picking alongside, the man he once called a brother, the man he built an empire with. Losing Frank wasn't just a personal blow, it marked the moment fans began to question whether the show could ever feel the same again. And that loss was only one piece of the storm building around Mike Wolfe. Because the next controversy was about to challenge something much bigger than their friendship. For years, American Pickers sold the fantasy that anything could be hiding inside a dusty barn. But as the show exploded in popularity, so did the questions about whether those unbelievable discoveries were really as spontaneous as they looked. The biggest spark came in 2016. During the now infamous Shelby in the Barn episode, an episode that still divides fans to this day. Mike and his colleague John S. walked into an Alabama property looking for a neon sign. What they accidentally stumbled on instead looked almost too perfect. A 1967 Shelby Mustang GT 500, untouched for over 40 years, sitting exactly where the cameras could capture it. Fans couldn't believe it. They flooded Facebook, Reddit, and forums with the same suspicion. How does a car worth over $75,000 just happen to appear right when the cameras show up? Viewers believed producers must have scouted it beforehand. Others said the entire scene felt staged to manufacture excitement. Even the owner's refusal to sell a rare move for a reality show made some think the moment was scripted for drama. And although the network never admitted anything, the noise never truly faded. But the doubts didn't stop there. Over the years, some fans accused the show of polishing reality into entertainment. Leads felt too convenient. Negotiations seemed too smooth. Sellers looked too prepared. Even though every reality show uses some form of planning, American Pickers suddenly found itself being judged under a microscope while trying to maintain the magic that made it famous. But what really hurt wasn't the online comments, it was how these accusations started to change the way longtime viewers saw Mike himself. When people start questioning the finds, they start questioning the picker. And for a show built on authenticity, that's a hit that cuts deep. Still, that controversy was nothing compared to the backlash waiting for Mike outside of television, where real people in a real town felt the impact of his success in a way cameras couldn't hide. Because this time, the anger wasn't coming from fans online, it was coming from the people living right next to him. As American Pickers grew, Mike Wolfe didn't just collect antiques, he started collecting real estate. What began as a passion for saving old buildings slowly turned into a quiet empire of restored properties across Tennessee. But in Columbia, a small town with deep history and deeper roots, his influence sparked something he never expected. It started in 2012 when Mike bought a historic home for around $700,000. Locals were curious but supportive. Restoring old places was what he was good at. Then he bought more, a vacation rental, a bike shop, commercial spaces, and then came the biggest project, the restoration of a 1947 Chevy dealership that had been abandoned for years. Mike poured more than $1 million into bringing it back to life, keeping its original bones and turning it into a beautiful piece of preserved history. But as his footprint grew, so did the tension. Property values started rising. New businesses followed his lead. Rents crept upward, and longtime residents began to feel squeezed out of the very neighborhoods they grew up in. Some saw Mike as a savior who breathed new life into forgotten corners of the town. Others saw him as the spark that lit the fuse on gentrification. Things escalated further when plans surfaced for an $83 million, 6-story condo project in the area, something many locals believed wouldn't have happened if the town hadn't suddenly become hot. Critics said Mike's influence was pushing Columbia away from its small-town identity. They accused him of turning it into a playground for tourists, investors, and trendy developments that didn't reflect the community's culture. Mike didn't ignore the backlash. He posted updates about his projects, showed the preservation work he was proud of, and emphasized that his goal was to save history, not erase people. But online, the debate grew louder. Some residents supported him. Others said he was changing the soul of the town without realizing the ripple effect. It was a conflict he never intended to create. The same passion that made him famous restoring the past had unintentionally created battles in the present. And it wasn't the only part of his life that was starting to fall apart from the inside. Because while the town debated him, his personal life was about to hit its most painful chapter yet. While the cameras showed Mike Wolfe chasing treasures across America, his personal life was quietly falling apart behind the scenes. In 2012, he married Jody Faith, a woman who stood by him long before American Pickers became a hit. They built a family together, welcomed their daughter Charlie, and survived one of the hardest battles any couple can face: Jody's fight with stage 2 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She was diagnosed in 2013, went through years of treatment, and was finally declared cancer-free in 2020. But the victory that brought them closer physically didn't heal what had already broken emotionally. By June 2020, their marriage had reached a point where neither could repair the distance between them. They separated quietly, and in December 2021, the divorce became official. On paper, it was labeled irreconcilable differences, but what it cost emotionally and financially went far deeper. The settlement was massive. Jody received more than $6 million in cash, multiple properties in Tennessee and North Carolina, royalties from American Pickers, and $2,000 a month in child support. She also got primary custody of Charlie, leaving Mike to rebuild a new version of fatherhood that worked around his constant travel and filming schedule. For someone known for spotting value in forgotten objects, the hardest part wasn't the money, it was realizing how much of his life had slipped through his fingers while he was on the road. He had spent decades searching for pieces of history, yet somehow lost pieces of his own along the way. The divorce forced him to step back and ask himself a question he had avoided for years. What mattered more, the chase or the people waiting at home? Still, even that heartbreak wasn't the final blow. Because just when Mike thought he had survived the worst of it, life delivered one more hit that would change how he looked at everything. And this next turning point wasn't about business, fame, or the show, it was about finally realizing who would stay in his life and who was gone for good. After the divorce and the whirlwind of public backlash, Mike Wolfe entered a phase most people never expected to see from him, a quieter, more reflective version of the man who once lived entirely on the road. When he turned 61 on November 6, 2025, it wasn't just a birthday, it was a reality check. A moment where everything he had lost, everything he had built, and everything he still cared about came crashing together. His girlfriend, Letitia Cleaney, posted a message celebrating not the TV star, not the business owner, but the man he had become through all the chaos. Her words highlighted something fans rarely saw. Mike slowing down long enough to appreciate the small circle he trusted, the people who stood with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. For decades, his identity was tied to constant movement, chasing leads, buying deals, restoring forgotten relics. But now, he was looking at life differently. He wasn't done traveling, he wasn't done picking, but he wasn't doing it at the cost of everything else anymore. He spent more time with his daughter Charlie, took quieter trips with Letitia, and talked openly about valuing meaningful relationships over work. And yet, even as Mike tried to rebuild a simpler, more grounded version of himself, the world around him wasn't slowing down. American Pickers was still filming. Fans were still debating the show. Rumors were still spreading, critics were still watching, and the biggest surprise of all was about to hit him from a place he thought was stable. Because right as Mike was finally finding balance again, something unexpected shut down one of the most iconic parts of his entire brand, leaving fans wondering whether it was the beginning of a new chapter or the end of an old one. Just as Mike Wolfe was finally stepping into a calmer chapter of his life, 2025 opened with a problem he couldn't fix by restoring or negotiating. In February, his Nashville antique archaeology store, one of the cornerstones of his entire brand, suddenly closed its doors. No warning, no countdown, no official explanation beyond a brief statement saying a nearby construction project caused a gas leak that forced an immediate shutdown. For most businesses, that might sound simple. But this wasn't just any store. This was Mike Wolfe's public headquarters, a place fans flew across the country to visit. A place tied directly to the success and identity of American Pickers. So when the doors stayed locked for days, then weeks, people started asking questions the statement didn't answer. Some fans believed the closure was temporary, an unfortunate setback that would be resolved soon. Others wondered if it was a sign of something much bigger. Retail stores across the country were struggling, tourism was unpredictable, and American Pickers had seen declining ratings in recent years. The timing felt strange, too strange to ignore. Was antique archaeology in trouble? Was Mike shifting his focus away from physical stores? Or was this simply an accident that turned into a PR problem no one knew how to handle? Even without official confirmation, whispers began spreading online. Some said the store was quietly being remodeled. Others claimed the show's future was uncertain, and this was the first domino to fall. A few even suggested it was linked to the changes in Mike's personal life. But one thing was clear. This wasn't the kind of closure fans were used to seeing. It was sudden, vague, and filled with questions that nobody, not even Mike, seemed eager to answer publicly. Yet while everyone speculated about the store's fate, Mike was already moving in another direction, making a decision that surprised even longtime fans. Because the next chapter didn't involve antiques at all. It involved something far louder and far closer to his heart. While fans were focused on the store closure, Mike Wolfe was quietly making a move that revealed far more about where his life was heading. For decades, he was known as the antique guy, the man who could spot value under layers of dust. But long before American Pickers, before the cameras and the fame, Mike had another obsession that never left him: motorcycles. Not modern machines, but rare, pre-1920 American bikes that told stories through every scratch, dent, and bit of rust. He wasn't the kind of collector who polished things until they looked new. He preserved them exactly as they were found, because to him, the imperfections were the history. And over the years, he built one of the most impressive private collections in the country. More than 130 antique motorcycles, some of them so rare, even museums struggled to find them. Then came January 2025. Out of nowhere, Mike announced he was auctioning off 62 motorcycles from his personal collection at Mecum in Las Vegas. Fans were stunned. These weren't random pieces. These were machines he had spent decades tracking down across barns, garages, and forgotten workshops. They were part of his identity. Collectors and longtime viewers wondered why. Was he downsizing? Was he shifting focus? Was something going on behind the scenes? But Mike explained it differently. He said he wanted to focus on specific eras of motorcycle history instead of holding on to everything, that he wanted these bikes to find new owners who appreciated them the way he did. It wasn't about money, it was about letting go of the pieces he didn't need anymore. Still, this move felt symbolic. For a man who held onto the past so tightly, selling such a huge chunk of his personal collection looked like a turning point. A sign he was changing from the inside out, reevaluating what mattered, who he was, and what he wanted the next decade of his life to look like. But this shift wasn't about stepping away from history. If anything, it was a clue that Mike was doubling down on something much bigger, a new version of his mission that went beyond antiques, beyond TV, and beyond anything fans had seen from him before. And what he built next showed exactly where his future was heading. For all the chaos in Mike Wolfe's personal life, there's one part of him that never changed: his obsession with saving history before it disappears forever. Long before American Pickers became a hit, Mike wasn't chasing TV deals, he was chasing stories. And even after the fame, the feuds, the divorce, and the criticism, that mission only grew bigger. His work with the National Trust for Historic Preservation became one of the most important parts of his identity. He wasn't just buying antiques anymore, he was trying to save the buildings where those antiques were born. Through campaigns like This Place Matters, Mike pushed millions of people to care about old towns, forgotten structures, and the small pieces of America that were slowly rotting away. But Mike didn't just advocate, he took action. In Columbia, Tennessee, he restored a 1947 Chevy dealership that had been ignored for decades, turning it into a living time capsule with its original design preserved. He bought run-down buildings others saw as lost causes and brought them back with care, turning dead spaces into living parts of the community again. Some people praised him for it, others blamed him for raising property values. But regardless of the controversy, one thing was undeniable. He was fighting to keep history alive. His passion didn't stop with towns, it extended to the next generation too. His book, Kid Pickers, encouraged children to explore the past through collecting, teaching them how to research, restore, and appreciate the stories behind old objects. It wasn't just a book, it was a blueprint for passing down curiosity. Meanwhile, antique archaeology grew into more than a store. The merch line, the restored buildings, the tourism impact, it all became part of a brand that celebrated the pieces of America most people overlooked. Fans could wear the story, walk through it, or take home a small part of it. Every item was a reminder of who Mike was long before TV fame. And even when he wasn't filming, Mike was working behind the scenes on Nashville's Big Backyard, a project designed to help small towns survive by attracting tourism, remote workers, and economic growth. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't televised, but it mattered especially to the small communities that needed those lifelines. Through all the noise, one thing became clear. Mike Wolfe wasn't just picking antiques anymore. He was picking the pieces of American history that were in danger of being forgotten and giving them another chance. But even with everything he rebuilt and everything he tried to protect, one question still hung over him, the question everyone watching wants answered. What really happened to Mike Wolfe? And the truth behind that question is more complicated, more personal, and far more revealing than anything shown on American Pickers. When you put everything together, the divorce, the feud, Frank's death, the accusations about the show, the Columbia backlash, the store closure, and the shift in his identity, it becomes clear that what happened to Mike Wolfe wasn't a single collapse. It was a slow buildup of pressure from every direction. For years, he lived on the road, chasing history with the urgency of a man who believed everything worth saving was always one step away from disappearing. But while he was busy restoring pieces of America, he never noticed how much of his own life was wearing down behind him. The marriage couldn't survive the constant travel. His friendship with Frank couldn't survive fame, tension, and silence. His reputation couldn't survive the weight of people expecting perfection from a show built on spontaneous chaos. And his projects in Tennessee, meant to preserve history, sparked new controversies he never intended to create. What really happened to Mike Wolfe is simple. Life caught up to him. The divorce forced him to confront years of strain he ignored. Frank's passing forced him to face regrets that would never get closure. The store closure forced him to accept that even the strongest brands can break. And the criticism forced him to understand that not everyone sees preservation the same way he does. But beneath all the losses, something else happened too. He slowed down, reconnected with the people who stayed, focused on his daughter, rebuilt his personal life, and shifted his energy toward the projects that truly mattered. Instead of holding on to everything, he began letting go of what no longer served him. Mike Wolfe didn't fall apart, he changed. He's still picking, still restoring, still preserving history, but with a different mindset shaped by everything he endured. For the first time in decades, he isn't chasing every opportunity. He's choosing the ones that align with the person he's become. And that shift, more than the drama or the headlines, is the real story behind what happened to him. What comes next is the chapter everyone wants to know. After everything he survived, what does Mike Wolfe's life actually look like today? Today, Mike Wolfe lives with a quieter focus than the man viewers watched racing across the country for more than a decade. He still works, still restores, and still travels. But the urgency that once controlled his life has faded. His priorities shifted toward the people who remained when everything else fell apart. He spends more time with his daughter Charlie, sharing the small moments that were difficult to experience during years of constant filming. His relationship with Letitia has brought him a sense of stability that wasn't possible during the chaos of world tours, long shoots, and non-stop travel. Together, they keep their lives centered around family, restoration projects, and time away from cameras. Professionally, he isn't slowing down. American Pickers continues to film, with new episodes and new states added to the lineup. Mike still leads the hunts, still meets collectors, and still tells the stories behind the objects he finds. But the show isn't the center of his identity anymore, it's just a part of it. His energy now leans heavily toward preservation work, small-town revitalization projects, and the community-driven initiatives he's been quietly building for years. 2 lanes, Columbia Motor Alley, restored storefronts, vintage motorcycle projects, and collaborations with historic institutions all continue to grow under his guidance. Even after auctioning off a large segment of his motorcycle collection, he remains deeply involved in the vintage bike community. He rides, collects, trades, and supports museums that focus on early transportation history. The Las Vegas auction wasn't a retirement, it was a reset. It was his way of clearing space for the next chapter. At home, he keeps his circle small and his focus sharp. He no longer tries to be everywhere or do everything. He chooses projects that match who he is now rather than who he used to be on camera. He's financially stable, emotionally grounded, and more protective of his time than ever before. The public sees less of him, but those close to him see a version of Mike that is calmer, more intentional, and more connected to what matters. This new chapter isn't about rebuilding the past, it's about living differently in the present. And while fans debate the show's future or the controversy surrounding him, Mike keeps doing what he has done since he was 6 years old, finding value in things most people overlook. But even after everything he has rebuilt in his personal and professional life, one final question remains, a question only the viewers can answer. If you're still here, don't wait, hit subscribe right now, because the next story is even deeper and you do not want to miss it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, tell me what shocked you the most, and share this video with someone who follows these stories as closely as you do. Big things are coming next, and you'll want to be here the moment they drop.